Well, hello, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Managing Editor of Supply Chain Brain, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation on measuring resiliency, introducing the Resilinc R Score, and featuring the top 25 R Score suppliers in the high-tech industry supply chain. Now, before we get started, one bit of housekeeping. We will be having a question and answer session at the end. Audience members are encouraged to submit questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on the question box in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. Now, we have three excellent speakers today. We're going to start with Bindya Vakil. She is CEO and founder of Resilinc and is a recognized thought leader in the area of supply chain risk management. She is a supply chain expert from companies such as Flextronics, Cisco, and Broadcom, and a published author and frequent speaker on the topic of supply chain resiliency. She's on the advisory board at the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics and is a founding board member of the Global Supply Chain Resiliency Council, a nonprofit dedicated to the advancement and practice of supply chain risk management. In addition to her MBA, Bindya holds a master's degree in supply chain management from MIT. She'll be followed by Joseph Chaco, who heads the R Score initiative at Resilinc. He helped develop the R Score methodology and is responsible for the future roadmap Resilinc's R Score services and products. Joseph and his team have deep data science expertise, which they have applied to Resilinc R Score development to accurately capture and model supply chain risk and resilience. Joseph has a master's degree in management science and engineering from Stanford University. Our third speaker is Eric Knott, Senior Manager of Sourcing Compliance for Micron Technology. Eric and his team's mission is to enable a compliant, sustainable, and resilient global supply chain. Eric has worked for Micron over the past 21 years, holding various positions of responsibility, including site buyer, Material Operations Manager, Central Business Analyst Manager, Corporate Procurement Program Management Manager, and Procurement Integration Manager. Prior to his current role, he was on assignment in Japan to support the integration of Micron's acquisition of Elpida and Rexchip. Eric has a Bachelor of Science from Eastern Oregon University. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Bindya Vakil. Bindya, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Bob. And thank you all for making us a part of your day today. So my job this morning is I will share a little bit about Resilinc and by way of context for those of you who may not be familiar with us, and then jump into the R Score. And then Joseph will present the analysis of the R scores for the high-tech industry suppliers and talk to you about the top 25 high-tech industry suppliers based on their R score. Followed by Eric at Micron. Eric will introduce Micron and talk to you about how the R score is being applied at Micron from a practitioner standpoint. And then finally, we'll have a few minutes for questions. So that's the plan. So in terms of just a quick introduction on Resilinc, Resilinc was actually founded in 2010 as the LinkedIn for supply chain, really simply speaking. Back then even we recognized that the risk problem is effectively a data problem. And in order to really get a handle on managing risk effectively, we felt that companies need to map the supply chain and collect visibility to multi-tier location information, part site mapping information from their suppliers, but do it in an efficient way without creating a tremendous amount of effort and manual work for suppliers. So what we came up with is just like you use LinkedIn, where you put in your information once about your resume, where you've been, etc., and share it with many individuals without having to replicate data entry and connect with them over time and update it in an efficient way. Similarly, on our platform, we invite suppliers to put in a lot of information about their global site locations, their factories, warehouse, part manufacturing at various sites, the recovery time, business continuity plans, as well as sub-tier suppliers in the tier 2 or 3 supply chain. And they can do all of this without having to replicate data entry customer by customer. So as the same supplier gets used by multiple customers, they can leverage all of this data across multiple customers and make it an efficient way to get the data. Now, because these suppliers, customers, and suppliers are all connected via our supplier network, so we're making sure that the right people at the customer are connected to the right people at the various suppliers, so that when a disruption happens, customers can reach the appropriate person without having to look for people after the fact, and then jointly they can collaborate and troubleshoot and make sure they're all able to recover and continue supply. So the Resilinc solution makes all of this possible in an efficient way within minutes during any disruption, because we're sensing these events as they occur in real time. And our solution then predicts how a factory fire or a labor strike or a flooding or earthquake type of event might affect which products, which parts, which sites are most likely to be affected, and then allow suppliers and customers to collaborate virtually within minutes. In addition to all of the platform data analytics type of work that is possible through our platform, Resilinc also works with customers throughout their transformational journey, because risk, as you all know, isn't something that you can just buy a technology and solve the problem. Your people have to go through a mindset change, and Resilinc works with our customers to make sure that that maturity comes to the organization over time. So as we've embarked on our journey to supply chain resiliency, what we learned is that, our customers cannot be resilient in isolation. They are inherently part of a network. They're connected to their suppliers. They're highly dependent on the various suppliers in their network. And so the entire network of suppliers has to change behavior, take ownership for being more resilient. Therefore, in order for our customers to meet their resiliency objectives, we have to make sure that suppliers embrace resiliency practices as well. Now, the first step to doing this is to actually create the awareness and to start the conversation around an accepted framework, so that everybody can align on what is the current state and what is the future desired state, right? So that's kind of where the R score really comes in. Now, why is the R score? Whoops, I'm sorry. I think I clicked a couple of, there we go. The challenge is that, the world has never really had a measurable framework to quantify and measure resiliency. There has not been any company with a uniform set of data across many, many hundreds or thousands of suppliers on different elements that can be used to measure risk or resiliency. And there has never been a unifying methodology either to quantify risk. So now, because there is no single metric or KPI, how can a customer and a supplier get together, put a baseline on where they are today, figure out, are they best in class, are they below average, are they at average, where are they, and then figure out, if I invest X amount of dollars to improve my resiliency, how much did my supply chain, how much improvement in resiliency did I create as a result? Now because we can't do that, this is a difficult situation, because then you can't really justify your investment in resiliency or get the organization aligned around the business case for resiliency. So really the fundamental problem at the end of the day is that the data simply wasn't there until Resilinc came along. So as I said at the very start, we were founded because we recognized that the risk problem was inherently a data problem. And so back in 2010, we started to collect data from thousands of suppliers in a standardized format. And this became very critical because over the last 7 years, Resilinc has mapped the supply chain genome. Now today, we are the world's largest repository for supply chain resiliency and visibility intelligence. We've collected data pertaining to sites and parts and business continuity and recovery times, etc., on more than 40,000 companies, having mapped more than 77,000 sites to different regions of the world. and tracking more than 1.8 million parts to the sites that touch them. And more importantly, we've mapped more than 60,000 sub-tier connections. So we know which suppliers are buying what from whom and through the sub-tiers. This becomes really important information. And so when you take this base data and add on to that business continuity, recovery, sub-tier mapping, alternate sites, redundancy, etc., it creates a framework for building a resiliency infrastructure. Now, all of this, keep in mind, is unstructured data. Typically, what Resilinc has managed to do is we have collected it, synthesized it, standardized it, and we've transformed what was traditionally unstructured or semi-structured data into structured content. And so this now becomes the backbone for developing an industry standard resiliency scorecard. So because we have the data problem solved, we began to work on developing the R Score methodology, right? Now we can measure resilience for these 40,000 companies on our platform, and that's the R Score. The R Score is a measure of resiliency. So it talks about, what the current state is. A low score means company is less resilient, that's bad. A high score is good. The graphic that Resilinc uses to showcase our score, it shows the company's R score in the middle. It compares it against where the industry average is, and it gives the best-in-class score. So now when you're looking at the R score at a high level, you can look at the score, and if you're a customer or a supplier on our platform, we offer you your own R score as well as the benchmark information for free. You can check the score, see how you compare, see what your weak or strong KPIs are at any time simply by requesting the R score through the Resilinc website. The R score, so this one I'll talk about how the R score is actually derived, right? So underneath the high score, the high level R score are essentially 5 sub-elements, and the R score is a weighted average of these 5 elements. These are transparency score, network score, continuity, performance, and supply chain risk management program maturity score. And each of these elements have several sub-metrics and KPIs within, and the roll-up of each of these metrics determines each of these scores. So let's look at each one really quickly. At a high level, if you look at transparency, the transparency score is foundational because it measures how much information is a supplier sharing on the Resilinc platform. The greater the transparency, the more the implied trust between a supplier and a customer. And trust comes, as you know, when you expect to have a long-term partnership with your customer. And so this is a very important score. It's foundational to measuring the R score. The next one is network score. The network score is a function of the sites where the supplier operates. And keep in mind, these are primarily manufacturing, warehouses, DC type of locations. It doesn't really measure sales offices, R&D offices. So this is a very clean, very synthesized list of sites that we are measuring. The score considers the natural disaster, geopolitical, and macroeconomic stability and robustness of each one of the locations that the supplier is depending on. The following one is continuity. So the continuity score looks at the supplier provided information, such as recovery times, their business continuity plans at the site level, alternate sites, etc. If a company invests in business continuity capabilities at a site level, that really indicates how robust their ability is to continue to support customers despite disruptions that might occur within their supply chain. The continuity score covers large-scale disruptions, right? And so on an ongoing basis, companies are continuously running into small things that can go wrong here and there, and their flexibility, their adaptability determine how they are performing on customer metrics such as on-time delivery, quality, etc. So these metrics go into performance score, which is the 4th element of the R score. And so customers look at ongoing supplier performance and put that measurement on the supplier scorecard. And so that becomes part of the supplier's ongoing performance score, operationally speaking. And then lastly, we look at the SCRM maturity score. This is very important as well because it looks at, does the supplier take ownership for their own supply chain resiliency, right? Are they monitoring disruptions in their supply chains? Are they communicating with their customers proactively when disruptions happen? Are they accurately notifying customers about recovery and timeframes and impact? Are they communicating with customers, you know, on an ongoing basis, mapping their supply chain proactively, multiple tiers deep? Are they aware of their own sub-tier failure points? What are they doing about it to proactively protect against critical failure points? All of these metrics determine the R score. Now, what Resilinc did was we adapted Yossi Sheffi's framework. So Yossi Sheffi from MIT, in his second book that came out in 2016, he introduced this three-dimensional framework for evaluating resiliency, taking into account likelihood and severity, which is the traditional way of looking at risk quantification. But Yossi added this third dimension called detectability. And we really bought into these three things because we adopted our R score methodology to this framework. So if you look at the 5 elements, then likelihood is indicated by the network score. Based on where you're located, the likelihood of something going wrong in your supply chain goes up or down. The detectability is influenced by your transparency with your customers and your own maturity. Meaning if you're sharing information with your customers, it improves their detectability when disruptions happen that you might be affected by. And if you've mapped your supply chain several tiers deep, it improves your ability to detect when something might be affecting your supply chain. And then finally, severity is a function of what you've invested as a supplier in supply chain flexibility, resiliency, business continuity, those types of investments, because these determine in a short term as well as a long term basis how quickly you can and cost effectively you're going to recover during small or big scale disruptions. So those are the 3 dimensions, and this is how the R score aligns to the Yossi Sheffi risk quantification framework. Now, in brief, the R score is the first step towards a measurable framework. Is it perfect yet? No. What we call it is this is R score 1.0, right? We're going to continue to seek feedback on this methodology from suppliers on our platform, from our customers, from industry experts, analysts, and other experts in this and thought leaders in this space. The goal is that R score becomes a conversation starter between companies or even, within your own organization. If you're a thought leader within your company, if you're interested in taking your organization down the resiliency journey, now you have a way to get started. You can use the R score to say, look, here's where we are today. Here's how we compare with others. Here's how far we are from best in class. And these are the changes that we need to make over time in order to improve. Now, if you're a customer, you could use your supplier's R score when you do a QBR, have a constructive dialogue with a supplier on improving resiliency. You can use their R scores during supplier selections, during RFPs, or when you're doing supply chain design or network design type of projects, right? If you're a commodity manager, let's say, you can acquire the R score and work on a roadmap for improving resiliency with your supplier. Now, let's say you're a supplier, you could actually get your own R score from Resilinc for free. Keep in mind, if your score is lower than others in your market, you might be losing business if it's too low, right? You might have competitors who are scoring better, and as customers use the R score to award business, you might be at a disadvantage. So you should be aware of your own resiliency score and R score and protect yourself by learning how you can improve it. Let's say you're a supplier and you have a great score. Now this is a huge opportunity for you to set up your supply chain as a key differentiator against your competition and use it as a way to win business. And this is fundamentally how Resilinc sees, the best-in-class companies winning using the R score. So that's my section. With that, I'll hand it off to Joseph. Joseph will be sharing the results of how the R score the methodology have been applied to over 3,000 companies in the high-tech industry supply chain. Thank you all, and Joseph, take it away.
Thank you, Vidya. Thanks for introducing the R score. For this part of the presentation, I'd like to go over insights from our analysis of R scores of the high-tech industry suppliers. Note that this is a quick summary, and for more details, you can log on to our website and download a free copy of the full R score white paper. For the analysis, we looked at over 3,000 suppliers from the high-tech industry. The sample contains suppliers who were either Tier 1 or Tier 2 suppliers, or both. What do we mean by supplier tiers? Well, supplier tiers are computed based on a supplier's relationship with a Resilinc customer. The supplier could be providing parts or services directly to a Resilinc customer, and those would be called a Tier 1 supplier. Tier 2s are those suppliers who provide services to these Tier 1 suppliers. For the analysis, the distribution was roughly similar across Tier 1s and Tier 2s. We had around 1,600 Tier 1s and around 1,500 Tier 2 suppliers. So what is the average R score for the high-tech industry? Well, we saw an average score of 2.8. Note that the score is a value between 0 and 10, with 10 being better or more resilient. The lowest score was 1.1, and the highest supplier scored 6.1. Why is the industry average so low? Well, we feel there could be a couple of reasons. Overall, we feel that the industry has underinvested in risk management. This could be because the risk management is still a nascent field. Companies are still figuring out how to best incorporate these ideas. Additionally, since this is a new field, there's limited data available around standardized risk reporting and benchmarking. Even if companies have invested in risk management, efforts are siloed, and there's no standard method to collaborate and share data. Interestingly, when we split the R score into supplier tiers, we see that Tier 1s perform better than Tier 2 tiers. With the average score of 3.2 and 2.4, there's a significant difference between scores of Tier 1s and Tier 2s. These observations validate some of our initial findings. Resilinc's been working with Tier 1 suppliers for over 5 years now. We've established strong relationships here, and there's also a higher awareness with the Tier 1 suppliers. Tier 2 mapping, on the other hand, is more recent with only 3 years of mapping history. Additionally, we have a rich data set around Tier 1 suppliers. We have visibility into details like site recovery times, business continuity plans, and more, adding to a better scoring methodology. Again, we feel that as we continue with the R score product, resiliency investments will become more mainstream, and the industry score will improve and shift further to the right. When we break down the R score into its components, we can see industry strengths and areas that require attention. As Vindhya mentioned earlier, the R score is made of 5 components. There's transparency, network, continuity, performance, and SCRM maturity. At 2, 1.5, and 1.6, the industry has relatively low scores in transparency, continuity, and SCRM, and these are areas for improvement. One should also note here that companies have already differentiated themselves in these areas. When you compare best-in-class scores with the industry average scores, you see a wide gap, and it further shows that there is opportunity for improvement. For the remainder of the presentation, I'd like to go over each of these areas, starting with transparency. The transparency score measures the depth and breadth of information shared on our network by our suppliers. Suppliers start providing information at a site level, and they can provide additional information on parts, sub-tier suppliers, and even map parts of these sub-tier suppliers. We see a lot of difference in how companies share data. The average transparency score was 2, with Tier 1 scoring 3.6 and Tier 2 scoring 0.6. The majority of information shared by Tier 2s focused on site-level details, while Tier 1s shared all the way up to sub-tier and sub-tier site mapping. 60% of the Tier 1s analyzed shared sub-tier data, with 150 Tier 1s providing commodity mapping at the sub-tier level. These best-in-class companies show that that by providing data, they establish trust in the supply chain, and they're able to collaborate effectively with their customers on many initiatives. For companies interested in improving their R score, transparency is a quick win. Simply by reviewing the information that you share on Resiliency or adding or editing the information that's already there, you can increase transparency in the supply chain and increase your R score. The average network score that we saw for the study sample was 4.4. Network scores were roughly normally distributed for most countries, for most companies, and there was no clear difference between Tier 1 or Tier 2 suppliers. We see a heavy footprint in Asia for the high-tech industry, followed by North America and Europe. Again, we look at supplier-owned sites and subcontractor sites when computing network scores. Additionally, most of Resiliency customers are based out of Europe and North America. The analysis looks at both manufacturing sites as well as logistics and warehousing sites. Our reliance on customers in North America and Europe might explain why you see big bubbles in North America and Europe. The network score, apart from looking at theoretical location risk data, also looks at historical data around events that happen in regions. The example over here highlights the region around the Pacific Ocean, which is highly unstable. This region is often called the Pacific Ring of Fire. Customers on Resiliency can map their supplier sites and track events that happen in these regions and effectively map it to their supply chains. Network scores are relatively harder for companies to influence. They often involve moving site locations or adding or removing sites. Now, these are more long-term and strategic plans and require various other factors to be considered apart from risk. To compute continuity scores, Resiliency considers information around recovery times, bring-up times, and business continuity plans. When analyzing the scores of the industry, we see that there's an underinvestment in business continuity capabilities. The average continuity score is 1.5, with Tier 1 scoring 2.4 and Tier 2 scoring 1.1. While we encourage companies to invest in business recovery and continuity measures, we also caution against overinvestment. At a minimum, companies should invest in continuity measures that account for the inherent risk in their networks. When we plot continuity scores against network scores, we see that few companies are on the top right corner who have a naturally resilient network, as well as have made high investments in continuity. There are also companies in the bottom left who have a network that is prone to external disruptions and have also underinvested in supply chain continuity measures. We feel that these companies might see more disruptions than others. A company's ability to influence a continuity score is medium. Implementing BCP plans, identifying alternates for your sites are some measures that we recommend to our customers. Performance score. The average performance score is 4.5. We don't see much spread in the data right now. Resiliency relies on customer data around on-time delivery, quality, cost competitiveness, etc., to gather data around performance score. What we did find was not all customers scorecard all their suppliers, and there are no standard templates for supplier scorecarding. With that, the data available to create performance score is very limited. Over time, we hope to gather more data here so we can make industry-level insights and recommendations. Maintaining good customer relations, and complying with customer requests are a great way to improve your performance score. A quick win here might be to reduce the turnaround time for vendor requests. For example, the supply chain visibility survey, for example, when a customer requests a supply chain visibility survey, turn it around sooner than later. That's what's going to help your performance score. The last section is the supply chain risk management and maturity score, or the SCRM maturity score. SCRM maturity score captures your transformation from a reactive supply chain partner to a resilient supply chain partner. The score assesses the company's capability around areas like supply chain mapping, event management and response, and proactive risk mitigation. From the analysis, we saw that most Tier 1 suppliers are in the aware stage, and a majority of Tier 2 suppliers are in the reactive stage. Even though the industry average was low, certain suppliers have already invested extensively in SCRM capabilities. These suppliers have distinguished themselves from the pack. Having institutionalized risk-adjusted thinking, these companies are turning supply chain risk into an opportunity. Many of these companies are recognized as industry leaders and are part of the Resilinc R Score top 25. A company's ability to influence their SCRM score is very high. If you're on the Resilinc system, start responding to Resilinc's event impact notices. This is a quick win. Else, you can always measure your current state. So you should start by measuring your current state. Resilinc has a free SCRM self-assessment tool that we could share if you want to do an SCRM assessment. With that, I'd like to introduce the R Score top 25. Note that these companies represent multiple areas of the high-tech industry, and we have companies from semiconductor to packaging and even services. These companies were chosen due to their extreme transparency they bring to the supply chain and their customers, and the mature nature of their supply chain resiliency programs. By partnering with companies like Resilinc, they've made significant strides in mapping their supply chains. Some companies have visibility even multiple tiers down their supply chain. These companies have established processes around event management and response. They're quick to inform their customers about active events and collaborate effectively to reduce the impact of an event both to themselves and their customers. These companies also proactively quantify risk. This lets them mitigate crises even before they happen. Congratulations, all winners. We are proud to recognize you and your contributions to the field. With that, I'd like to hand it over to Eric North from Micron. Eric will share how Micron leverages products like the R Score in their risk management program and provide the practitioner's perspective.
Thank you, Joseph, and thanks, Bindia, for the opportunity today to speak on behalf of this important data set here. Just to introduce you to Micron, we do have a global network, both from a Micron location perspective, manufacturing, sales offices, and design centers, but then, of course, a very diverse, complex supply chain across the globe. Some kind of quick facts on Micron. We are headquartered here in the U.S. We're a producer of memory and storage technologies. We do have the largest portfolio of those areas. Segments are from a compute to networking, storage, consumer, mobile products, and embedded into automobile as well. But to talk specifically today about how we're using this type of standard data set to drive our supply chain resiliency, I want to talk through really four kind of key bullet areas to walk through how we're using this today. So to start with complexity and transparency. So based on the complexities of our global market, multiple events or concerns that happen both in quantity and variety across the globe, ensuring and mitigating those interruptions to your supply chain, transparency of your network and health of how well your programs and processes are working through a standard set of KPIs and metrics is obviously very, very critical to your business. To move to the alignment and visibility bullet, there are obviously various methods and ways to measure health and progress. But utilizing a standard baseline set of metrics, very similar to what Bindia had highlighted in her intro, can help drive and align progress and direction across your company's various supply and spend areas. This enables you to highlight and prioritize, as well as understand the anomalies observed, through your data set. To move to your continuous improvement area, any healthy program, initiative, objective, focal area will have continuous improvements in place. Even if a measurement isn't a key KPI or metric for your organization, looking and viewing a set of standard measures will certainly provide additional insights or areas that could represent a potential miss or gap that maybe otherwise your company wouldn't have been focused on. To talk through the source to end markets, connecting what a company expects of its suppliers to what is expected from its customers provides clear advantages of synergy, stability, and focal points. The R Score provides a view that can be looked at from really end to end. And that's certainly an area that we're working through today. So just in general, just to kind of wrap this up through just a very simple maturity scale and utilizing this R Score, enables and aligns organizations to baseline scoring. It helps you to align, prioritize actions against very specific metrics. Helps you provide a definition and direction for your resiliency journey. And then certainly will enable you to connect to your company or department or area strategy. That's all I wanted to share today. I appreciate the time, and thank you. Bindia, Joseph, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, so with that, Bob, I think if we have any questions, we could go through some questions on the call.
Sure. Yeah, thank you very much, Bindia. Okay, we do have some questions. This first one is directed at Resilinc. It is, I am interested in knowing my company's R score. How do I request an R score from Resilinc?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. So if you want to view your R scores, Resilinc offers suppliers or companies free access to their own R scores. You can log on to the Resilinc website, and there's a section called R scores, or you can even log on to www.therscore.com. You can fill out a form, and you can request access. If you are already part of the Resilinc network, we will be reviewing your order, and within 48 hours, we usually ship you your R scores. The scores themselves are updated on a quarterly basis, so we request that you keep coming and requesting our scores once a quarter to make sure that you have the latest data there.
Thank you. Here's a question from Micron. What type of internal improvements has Micron driven due to the R score?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It has really helped us to really identify the gaps and improvements, really internal to our internal processes. That has helped us to prioritize and improve. And maybe more importantly, or as importantly, it has aligned us in areas that within our own program and processes to what we're really asking of our suppliers. So it's kind of an end-to-end view from both what we expect of our suppliers should be what is expected from us as well. So it certainly has been driving that direction. Thanks.
Thank you. Back to Resilinc. Can I request R scores of my suppliers, another supplier's companies through Resilinc?
Yeah, so if you wanted to acquire R score for any of your suppliers, what we typically do right now is we accept we take the request, we work with the suppliers, and subject to supplier approval, we do share our scores with you. So please do feel free to come to the website, www.therscore.com, and keep in mind that while we do provide the supplier their own R score for free, or if you wanted to get your own R score, you would be able to get that for free. But if you were looking for a third-party score, then we do charge for that. So just be prepared that there will be, that is a priced product, and also it is subject to the supplier approving your access to their score. So we don't charge up front, but if the supplier, number one, we have the R score available and the supplier approves your access to it, at that time we would charge your credit card.
Thank you very much. Again, to Micron, again, back to the internal efforts theme here, how successful has it been to get internal buy-in from organizational stakeholders?
A very good question and an important question. Micron has really a culture of continuous improvement and always looking to improve and do things better. And with that in mind, our internal teams have welcomed this transparency and direction to help build and measure our supply chain resiliency. And then along with Resilinc's strong support and their active involvement in pursuing and pushing some standards, they're always available to help provide those additional insights and support with our teams as well. So it's progressing certainly in the right direction.
Thank you. Again, for Resilinc, if I have questions on my R score, does Resilinc help me to understand how my score is calculated and how I can improve it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if what we have for R score is we've divided up the products into 3 different reports. So the first one is R score benchmark, which is where you get your own score and you have the ability to compare how your score is against others in the industry, average versus best in class. The second product is the diagnostics report, which shows you the breakdown of how your R score is derived. You get your comparison across how you score on transparency versus others in your industry versus best in class. You get your score for each of the R score elements: transparency, network, continuity, performance, and maturity, and you can compare against average versus best in class and get more diagnostic information about how each one of these scores is derived. And then finally, we have the insights report, which goes into tremendous amount of detail of how your score is calculated, and for each one of the subcategories of calculating the R score, you get recommendations for, if you did these 3 things, you would be able to improve your transparency score. If you did this, these are the strategies for improving your network score. So it's an in-depth report that goes into step-by-step how you can improve your overall R score, as well as the gaps on each of the elements of the R score.
Okay, thanks, Vidya. Again, for Micron, what challenges, if any, have you run into, and do you have any advice for practitioners to overcome them?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Maybe before I answer that question, I'd like to, if you wouldn't mind, maybe going back and just one more thing to add on the last question that I fielded as it related to the internal buy-in with our organizational stakeholders. Another area that the standardization and view and metric process has enabled us to do is really provide a mechanism to scorecard and do business reviews with our supply base on a very standard set of metrics, which certainly has driven a lot of internal buy-in with our organizational stakeholders. So to come to your last question here, the challenges, if any, to overcome, probably the biggest one is to just take the time to understand your data, your attributes, what's important, what are those key drivers for your business, and what that means to drive your priorities forward. That's really the biggest the challenge is really getting it defined and then pursuing forward with it.
Okay, thank you. Now, the R-squared scoring seems a little subjective. How does Resilinc come up with metrics that are more objective? For instance, how does Resilinc determine the document turnaround time for scoring?
Sure. Thanks, Bob. So we try to avoid subjectivity in the scoring itself, mainly by 2 things. A, we look at relatively objective metrics, things like site locations or the recovery times at a reported site, or the quality of the business continuity plan. So these are, we track objective measures in all these metrics, and that's what we report on. Further, because we know that suppliers work with multiple companies, we try to aggregate information across customers and take the average or some measure of the mean, thereby, again, removing any biases or making it more objective.
Okay, thank you. Can the R score be applied to a full industry, for example, the electronics industry?
For this example in particular, what we did was we did apply it to the whole industry. Note that right now we only look at 3,000 odd suppliers, but for sure in the coming years, as and when we get more data, we'll be rolling out this program across suppliers and then find and encapsulate the entire industry. But yes, for sure we can apply it to particular industries. Or even one of the activities that we're trying to do is drill down into particular segments. For instance, if you're only interested in memory suppliers, we do want to create analysis for this industry, particular industry segments.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I believe it's time to wrap this presentation. I want to thank our three fantastic speakers, Bindia Vakil and Joseph Chaco and Eric Knott, for that really valuable information on risk management, resiliency, and the R score. I also want to thank our audience for attending and listening in. If you have any additional questions that our speakers did not address during the presentation, I'm sure that they would be pleased to answer those questions offline. But for now, thank you everybody. Have a great day.